revelations this morning involving the U.S. drone strikes program. In a 16-page memo obtained by NBC News, the Justice Department makes the legal case for the killing of American citizens overseas if they are believed to be, quote, senior operational leaders of al-Qaeda or an associated force, even if there is no intelligence indicating they are engaged in an active plot to attack the U.S.
Wow.
Joining us now, NBC News national investigative correspondent Michael Isikoff, who broke the story last night after obtaining the copy of the government memo. Michael, take us through the significance of the memo.
Sure. Good morning, guys. Look, this memo sheds light on what is one of the most controversial and secretive policies of the Obama administration, not just its drone strike campaign, but reserving the right to use drones against American citizens. And this came up in 2011 when a drone strike killed Anwar al-Awlaki, an associate in Yemen, Samir Khan. Both were U.S. citizens. Neither had been charged with any crime. So what we have here are what critics call extrajudicial killings, killings ordered by intelligence officials of the U.S. government without any judicial review, without any right of the citizen to argue his or her case in court. So these are very sticky legal issues, and the legal basis for these strikes has been kept a secret by the Obama administration. You may remember we had huge fights back in the Bush era about the legal memos for enhanced interrogation tactics, the so-called torture memos. Ultimately, they became public. This is viewed by some as an analogy for that. Secret memos upon which huge U.S. government policies with great consequences are being made. We got a copy of this memo, which is not the OLC memo, the Office of Legal Counsel memo, but it is a white paper, 16-page white paper that mirrors and tracks it and gives us much more detail about what the legal basis for these strikes are.
You draw a great analogy with the Bush administration, and, except for the fact that there you may have been giving somebody intense interrogation after picking them up off the field. Here, you've got a situation where the U.S. government is killing Americans without judicial review, without any crimes being charged against them, as you said, without them having a right to defend themselves, and even without a right of having to have any specific actionable intelligence. It's hard to say how many stop signs were blown through here. But for those that were shocked at the Bush administration, quote, torture memos, they must be really stunned by this. Americans can be killed, again, not charged with any crimes, no judicial review, no actionable intelligence, nothing, just suspicion.
Right. Well, you know, what the administration will say is more than suspicion. They'll say hard intelligence. We all know hard intelligence can be hard, or it can be awfully squishy and sometimes horribly wrong.
Like the WMDs in Iraq, right.
Excellent case in point. But I think if you actually read the document, and we've posted it online, it's on NBCnews.com now, you see that some of the definitions they lay out in this memo are open to fairly wide interpretation. I'll give you an example. When the most exhaustive public accounting of this was given by Attorney General Holder last year, he gave a three-part test for when these sorts of killings can be lawful. And the first one is when there is an imminent threat of violent attack against the United States, when the U.S. has that intelligence of such. Well, you read the memo and you see that imminent threat is subject to a somewhat broad interpretation. In fact, they use the phrase broader concept of imminence. It does not mean, the memo explicitly says, that there's active intelligence of an ongoing plot. It may mean they have active intelligence of what the memo calls recent activities involving violent plots, but no ongoing plot, no active plot against the United States.
Oh, I mean, and then it says here also that, quote, there is no evidence suggesting he has renounced or abandoned such activities.
Right.
And the memo doesn't,
almost as though the burden is on the target to prove that they've renounced what they might have advocated or been involved in the past.
So they have to renounce something that there may be no actionable intelligence on. I mean, this is an absolute mess, Michael. Thank you so much for bringing this to us.
Michael, thank you.
Great work. This
thanks.
This is so frightening.
What it shows is Democrats and liberals whom were very critical and even called for extreme legal action to be taken against the Bush administration. We're now obviously seeing some decisions. The Obama administration may argue differently. And let me make clear, I support what the Obama administration is doing here. But it goes to show just how difficult, how messy, and for when the Bush administration would make the point, those senior leaders would say it's difficult for perhaps some to understand what we're dealing with here. When we talk about this level, all national security decisions are serious, but when we're talking about this kind of threat, we have to make at times very messy and sometimes uncomfortable and oftentimes questionable decisions. So I think my only point is Democrats need to now think back about how they conducted themselves and the questions they raised about Bush administration tactics. I didn't raise those questions as aggressively as some of my friends did, but I think it's important that everybody take a step back and take a breather here, particularly Democrats.
Because this would be as questionable, if not more questionable.
If this were happening and his name was Bush, I think there'd be a lot of criticism coming at this president.
If George Bushmaker had done this, it would have been stopped.
I think it would have been certainly a huge controversy that would have erupted. And the question is, you know, how many questions will this administration face on this? And I think it goes back to the point you made several years ago when
Scarborough?
President Obama was a candidate, and you said that when he becomes president and he looks at the classified documents, things will change, and he won't close Gitmo, and he won't do certain things that he's criticizing now, and other things will happen. This is what you said before he even stepped into office.
In the summer of 2008, he was running around saying basically that George Bush hated the Constitution. He was going to shut down Gitmo, and I laughed and said, no, you're not. No, you're not. Because
you also called they wouldn't try that terrorist here in New York. I remember having many conversations around the table about that.
They should try the terrorists in New York. No, you're not. But I'm going to say, and I think we should have a constitutional lawyer or two on, not a conservative constitutional lawyer, but somebody more down the middle, not liberal. But try to get somebody, or get a group of people.
I think someone who was very critical of the Bush administration.
And talk about how, Willie, this sets just new standards. Like Bush is talking about seizing a known terrorist, like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, pulling them out and taking them to a black site. Here, we're talking about dropping drones, not just on one person, but as we know, killing a lot of people around it, and killing Americans who have a constitutional right to have a jury of their peers, to kill Americans who are not charged with crimes, who have no judicial review, no actionable intelligence, and now in this memo, that they have the burden. The burden is on them before they are killed to run out and yell, I am not a terrorist, I am not a terrorist, as if they went out and yelled, I am not a terrorist, they wouldn't get a drone dropped on their head there too. This is just dangerous.
Well, for all the concerns about due process at Guantanamo, and I share a lot of those, people being held there for a decade without charge, this goes several steps further. This says we can kill you without due process. We can kill you on suspicion that you're a bad guy. So we're not even going to bother taking you somewhere and offering the possibility that eventually there'll be a trial. We're just going to take you out of the game with a drone.
And by the way, on that point, I remember Padilla reading the American who supposedly had the dirty bomb. I remember reading that, and he'd been locked up without a lawyer. And I remember being shocked at that and saying, oh, the guy has a right to a lawyer.
Right.
Here, they've got a right to nothing. They just have a right to be killed by an indiscriminate drone strike if somebody is suspicious in the U.S. government.
Michael Isikoff mentioned the name Anwar al-Awlaki, the guy in Yemen who was taken out, American citizen who had renounced his citizenship. But a couple weeks later, his 16-year-old son was killed in a drone strike. And at the time, the Obama campaign, this was Robert Gibbs, when asked why this young man was killed, an underage U.S. citizen, he said, quote, he should have had a far more responsible father, talking about al-Awlaki's father. So because of suspicion of his father and where he was in Yemen at a given time, he was killed with God knows how many other people who should not have been killed.
And by the way, this happens, Mark, if you are if you are in the company of somebody that the United States government suspects, and you are a young male, you are, in this world, now presumed guilty. And you could be killed, again, for having, quote, the wrong father. This is so chilling.
It is not being weak on the war on terror to not find this to be chilling and a real threat to our civil liberties. And there's some United States senators asking questions about it with no judicial review. I think it's incumbent upon senators, with the release, Michael Iskoff getting this memo, to say, what else do we need to know about this program? Because the standard is brand new, and it involves killing Americans without any of the safeguards that we expected pre-9/11.
And by the way, some people, and I think you said it, Harold, was it John Yoo?
Yeah, John Yoo.
Y-O-O.
Teaches out now at Berkeley.
So, yeah, there's some people on the left that owe this guy an apology. They just do. I mean, because
or the criticism has to be as ramped up again.
Well, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
I mean, because his torture memos, which, again, I was not a fan of, didn't like a lot of the conclusions that they drew, because I thought they were going fast and loose with the truth in some cases. Those things are child's play compared to what the federal government can do now and who they can kill without, again, let me say it again, no evidence, no judicial review, no ability to confront your accuser.
You got to have you on and pick someone to go pick a moderate to liberal or whomever, constitutional scholar who may have been against some of that. But remember, we are talking about people who might be hanging out with terrorists. I mean, I do think the question should be asked of the administration: how many people, how many Americans have been targeted? And if you happen to have a known terrorist on the CIA or Defense Department's watch list in your living room, perhaps you have some issues too.
Well, no,
don't get me wrong.
I'm sorry.
And I know you're not.
No, you don't, Harold. Did you go to law school? If you were an American, you're telling me that if you're an American overseas and you happen to stumble into the wrong zip code with a terrorist in there, you could be killed because somebody is sitting in the living room of a guy who is a terrorist.
I've never had one in my living room. So
the United States government, yeah, but you may not know the guy's a terrorist.
Call me old-fashioned.
Maybe you know him from the mosque that you're going to. Maybe you're the only two Americans. I mean, I don't know how to play this out.
I think all these questions have to be answered.
But I'm telling you, just because you are in the same proximity with a suspected terrorist who has not been charged with any crimes, then you may be killed.
Call me old-fashioned. I like checks and balances on the executive branch, even during war.
I agree with you. The Senate should ask these questions. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah. So here's my question. I get the hypocrisy even of it, or the disconnect between the criticism that previous administrations have received and this policy. But do you think this policy, is there a potential it might be necessary?
No. No. You've got to have standards. You've got to have some standards. I mean, I thought that's what everybody was screaming and yelling about as far as the Bush enhanced interrogation program was. I mean, when those things were going on, and actually they went in and seized one person who they actually had actionable intelligence on, and then took that one person out and then interrogated them and got information that they thought would lead to the saving of other lives. You even have to have standards there. You just can't grab an American citizen like Padilla, like we said, and Willie throw him in a jail and keep him there for years without seeing a lawyer.
And in fairness, there is a group of progressives, and have been for some time, who are adamantly against this drone program, and now their voices are getting louder and louder, especially after this report comes out today.
All right, coming.
It's not about agenda. It's not about mobilizing people. It's about dialing for corporate dollars. These two parties have sold the U.S. government and the American people to the highest bidders.